In the beginning, God created. Then he created man in his own image. Then man created. Those who know him then are creative Christians.
Let's meet one of them now.
We're about to meet Danae Samms. Danae is an enthusiastic creator. She began writing when she was 4 with her first play and continued through earning her degree in journalism. She has her own blog. She's written a novel, September Christmas, and a poetry book, The Coffee Bible, and the historical fiction series, Persephone. She is a stand-up comedian and placed among the top comics in the Comedy Chateau's International Comic Festival. Regularly, she is a co-host on the podcast The Con Guys. The only thing she's been doing longer than writing is horseback riding. While host shows were never a forte, Danae has spent plenty of time riding and training. Most of that is with her horse, Maggie. So let's now meet Danae Samms.
How's it going, Mel?
How you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing real well, thank you. Golly,
Awesome.
there's a button. I probably shouldn't.
I like your fall setup there. Happy
all over the place, but you are. What was your day like today?
It was good. It was busy. I did a few hours of work and I had to drop some things off and then come back here and get Zoom set up to talk to you. But it was good. Sorry if it takes a second to connect on a couple of things. This is still a new computer. And
You got
stuff
much
that you
better
just
lighting
have,
than I have.
forget about. Sorry?
You've got much better lighting than I have.
Oh, well, I have a ring light.
Oh, do you? I got to get one
Oh,
of
they make a
those.
huge difference. I love them.
So tell me what it's like to be a stand-up comedian.
Well, I mean, I got into it because my mom really pressured me into it. Um, it's one of those things. I actually have Karen Covell to thank, who you interviewed, and I listened to that one, and I loved it. Basically, I really enjoy being silly and making people laugh, and I do think I have the spiritual gift of encouragement. And I connected with a very awesome lady by the name of Jennifer Lewis, who had done stand up in the past. And it was just this thing of, hey, I really want to get into stand up. I don't know how. And she coached me a lot. We had a few friends get together and just workshop our material together. And then it was basically just, finding um, different comedy clubs that have open mics. And you go and you audition and they say, hey, we liked you, why don't you come do a show for us? And they schedule you, and if that show goes well, they say, okay, cool, you want to come back at one of these dates? And you come back, and then they say, cool, you want to come back at one of these dates? And you come back and they say, cool, you want to come back at one of these dates? Forever.
When I think of a stand-up comedian, I think of somebody that kind of lays claim to a certain set of subjects that they're going to be funny about. Do you have something that you're kind of lay claim to?
Well, that is a thing. It's a book that I've read. It talks about how if you want to be a comedian, you do have to have a very distinct style and a way of doing things, because we know Kevin Hart is kind of being the guy with the faces and the general confusion is his big joke. So I've only been doing this for about a year, so I'm still figuring out some of my style. I mean, I have my style down for the most part. But I do a lot of storytelling because I think I've had an unusual life, and I am very much of the opinion of, you find things to laugh at in every circumstance. And you can find ways to turn those into interesting stories to tell people all the time. So
would you be, would
storytelling,
you,
I guess, short answer.
I didn't hear that last part. Please forgive
Oh,
me.
I'm
I think I
sorry.
talked
I
over you.
oh no, I apologize. I am mumbling a little bit. I was just saying, storytelling would probably be the best way to describe my comedy
Yeah.
because it's a lot of things I've been through before that I talk about.
Would you tell us a story right now? I'd love to hear
Oh
one.
man.
Yeah.
Um, so I do have a longer set about being a pastor's kid because my dad was a pastor. He's retired now. I mean, he still preaches on occasion, but he was a pastor in West Virginia, which is a great setup on its own. And he, in addition to preaching on Sundays and Wednesdays, he did a lot of the maintenance around the church. He drove the church bus and picked kids up on Sundays and Wednesdays before and after church. And we ministered a lot to kids from like Hollows and a little bit of the inner city area, a lot of kids from drugs homes and things like that, that really didn't have an understanding of love, that needed to be in church. They needed to know God's love and see that someone did care about them. There was a greater being out there. And but unfortunately, because of the circumstances they came from, they didn't have a lot of social corrals that we normally do. And so a story I like to tell is about my dad driving the church bus, and the car wasn't paying attention, almost hit the bus. My dad swerved at the last second. He checked to make sure the kids were okay. And then one kid in the back shouted, "Don't you worry, Pastor, I flipped him off for you." So,
That's cute. I like that.
um,
So
yeah.
you grew up a preacher's kid? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir. I was lucky enough to be saved at a very young age, which
Very
makes
cool.
my testimony not exciting because I have known I've had a relationship with Jesus just about as long as I've been able to understand that such a thing exists, which I'm thankful for. But all the time you hear the testimonies of, God saved me from drugs, God saved me from this and this, and I'm just like, I got saved when I was 4 and baptized when I was 5. So it's less exciting.
Saved you from kindergarten is what he did.
Yes. Well, I got saved before I was in kindergarten, actually. I was 4 and not quite 5. Um, I do say my baptism story is more exciting than my salvation story because my dad baptized me since he was our pastor. We had really nice jacuzzi that had been donated to the church, and that's what we used as a baptismal. And my dad would always be like, "Okay, like, do you believe Jesus died for your sins? Are you going to live for him? Have you given your heart to Jesus?" The whole spiel to double check. And then, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." And he would have you hold your nose, hold your arm, and he would dip you. And he leaned down and he dipped me. And like I said, I was 5 years old at this point. When he dipped me, he realized he didn't dunk me all the way under, and he looked me up. So I let go of my nose. I opened my eyes, and he realized his mistake, and he dunked me again. And I still remember this. Excuse me.
He was going to
Let me
drown
just
you
laugh at
no
my own
matter
jokes
what.
real quick. I still remember the yeah, yeah. I remember the sight of just the hot jacuzzi water in front of my eyes and the burning sensation in my nose. And I would always watch people get baptized and cry from happiness afterwards because they were just so excited about their walk with the Lord. And I cried because my eyes were burning. So
Well, I didn't come to the
yeah,
Lord
my
till I was
baptism
about
story.
36 years old. Well, that's a lie too. When I was 9 years old, I was could have been saved at a Baptist camp. I remember being baptized and ridiculed by my cousin about it. In fact, he actually slapped me at one point when I was getting a little too overwrought. And but then I kind of walked away, and I didn't come back till about when I was 36. And it's
Hmm.
I kind of look at all that time as such a waste, and I think it's kind of neat that you only have that 5 years of and it's not waste. I mean, it's beautiful 5 years. Uh, you write also. Well, how do you is that? Did I pronounce? Maybe I didn't pronounce it right. Persephone, is that the
Oh, Persephone.
Persephone? Say it again.
Persephone.
Okay.
Persephone. Yeah. It's
What?
so that's a
Tell me
character from
about
Greek
that.
mythology.
Just to let the
Yeah.
audience know, she's also a writer and has written a novel. I cover this in your intro. I don't know if you've heard that yet, but also a historical novel. Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, I have published 4 books now, 3 of them novels, one a comedy book of comedy poetry, I guess would be the best way to describe it. But my latest 2 are historical fiction that are loosely based on the Greek myth of Hades and Persephone, which I'm very much drawn to because my name actually comes from Greek mythology. Danae was the mother of Perseus, who slew Medusa, the Gorgon. And so there's some allusions to Greek mythology in the story, but I also love history. I've been a history dork since I was little, from reading things like American Girl books and having just that interest has always grown in me. And something I've always loved is reading historical fiction. And it's just yeah, it's a series I've been working on. So the first book in the series is called Queen of Hell. The second one just came out this year in June, and it's Goddess of Spring. And there will be 4 total. Book number 3, I have been working on. I'm not sure yet when a publishing date will happen because we've gotten stuck with some writing stuff, which happens a lot, unfortunately. And between comedy and writing and life in general, there is not as much time for working on every project as I would like to have, especially when that project just kind of gets stuck in a writer's block moment. You just have to spend a lot of time staring at nothing. Nothing happens. It's very frustrating, but we will get there. And if you follow my Instagram or my website, my Instagram is DNAYS, my website, DanaeLSamms.com. There are frequent updates. At a minimum, every month you can get an email about what's coming next.
Well, you also wrote a poetry book called the Coffee Bible.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that one.
That sort of started as a joke. I wrote it with my roommate from college, who is still good friends with me, Ariel McGowan. She's listed as the illustrator on it. And it kind of started um, as Snapchat joke back and forth of these nonsense verses we made up based on coffee. And it became a game where we just kept sending back and forth really silly stuff. And I kept a lot of them and wrote some more. And Ariel is an incredibly talented artist and illustrator. So he came up with some designs for it. And we put them together and published it. And I've taken it to a few coffee festivals. And I've had a couple of book signings with it. And people always tell me like that's their favorite book that I've written, which is interesting because the least amount of work probably went into it. And I love reading poetry, but when it comes to rhyming patterns, I'm awful at it. And whatever part of our brain that calculates rhythm, I don't have that. And I'm sure there are poetry errors. My brother has a degree in English and a master's in creative writing. So he told me there were plenty of errors. He didn't, of course, point them out so that I could fix them, but he said that they were there. And yeah, it was just a very silly book that for anybody that likes coffee or tea to read.
Well, if you're if you're writing things like poetry and something like Persephone, that's prose, uh, it, and then you're also then writing your comedic routines and so forth. Which one do you prefer? I mean, is it something that you just kind of like to do one, then the other, and then the other, or is there one that's starting to stand out now?
I mean, I love all of it. I wouldn't call myself a poet per se, because I don't think I can write poetry at all unless I'm talking about coffee. That seems to be the only time that the muse strikes me. Um, I don't know if I have a favorite because they both are so different. The thing about writing is you are bearing so much of your soul, and there's definitely that challenge of showing it to someone. I have a lot of friends that are actors, and I do understand from just doing theater myself, acting is bearing your heart. It's showing a lot of yourself in a very intimate side. Whereas writing your own story and publishing it and putting it out there is bearing your soul and showing so much more. I think a lot of times actors can have the excuse of, oh, the directing wasn't great, the writing wasn't great, you came on a bad night to the play, so there were a couple of things that didn't go right, maybe you didn't enjoy that. Whereas with writing, there is nothing to hide behind. It's simply, this is what I wrote. It is all of me. And if you don't like it, that's okay, but I'm going to probably think that you hate me a little bit.
How do you work up a comedy routine? How does that work?
So a lot of times it comes from just ranting. I One of my more successful bits is about how many times I've been a bridesmaid, because I'm single. I have nothing in the future that indicates me getting married anytime in the next decade or beyond. But I've been a bridesmaid 6 times, and they just kept happening one after the other. And just from ranting about that to friends, it sort of comes about. I have a really awesome roommate who has come to all of my comedy shows and is incredibly supportive and gives a lot of really helpful feedback. She doesn't just sit there quietly and say, "Oh, that was great, do it more." She tells me when something isn't funny and helps me work with it. But it'll come from things like, I'll see her at the end of the day after we've both been working, and I'll be like, what really grinds my gears? And I'll go on a rant about utter nonsense. And she's like, "This is funny. Why don't you write this down?" And I usually tell her, "Okay, you think it's funny. Most one else probably won't." But I appreciate that I can make
I like that. You
um
mentioned that you get together with other creative friends and kind of bounce your material off of each other. Did I understand that correctly? Or
Yeah, I haven't been able, the group has really grown thanks to Jennifer Lewis and the help of the Hollywood Prayer Network. There is a really awesome crew that goes by the name Upside Down Comedy. They usually meet every other Tuesday. And if you just follow Hollywood Prayer Network, they'll let you know the dates. And they are so cool about announcing what's coming next. They let people come in and work on things. My writers group happens to meet at almost the exact same time, so I've missed quite a few of them. But if you're wanting to get into comedy in the Los Angeles area with kind people who also love the Lord, I very much recommend checking out Upside Down Comedy, because it's other Christians who just want to try their best to make people laugh and be supportive of each other. So it's a great place. They still get together. I try and make it every now and then. I was able to get to one a couple months ago, and it's a great atmosphere to workshop your new material.
um, it, I'm thinking that well, I bought a book a while back. It was, are you familiar with Milton Berle? He was in my generation way back when.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah, and he wrote a compilation of all his jokes that was stuff he admittedly stole from everybody else, and it was funny. It was, in fact, I have it by my bedside there every now and then. I'll take it out and look at it.
Nice.
Uh, do you guys share material? I hate to use the word stolen. That's not in our vocabulary, but do you share each other's material at all, or how's
I
that
think
work?
there's definitely room to help each other with jokes. The hardest audience you'll ever have are other comedians, but I have a whole bit, like I said, I'm a pastor's kid. I have a bit talking about my brother is convinced he's an edgy pastor's kid. If you're not a church person, there are two kinds of pastor's kids: goody two shoes, edgy pastor's kids. We're like Captain America and Deadpool. My brother is convinced that he's an edgy pastor's kid because he's like, I drink IPA and I do woodworking. And I just go, oh no, you're just a white guy with a beard. And I made that joke. I made that joke at a comedy night with a friend I know through Upside Down Comedy, and she was emceeing. And afterwards, she's like, "Yeah, he's got a beard. He works with wood, and he drinks mild alcohol. He actually sounds a lot like Jesus." So I asked her about it. I was like, "That was really funny. Do you mind if I use that joke?" And she was like, "Of course not. I said it out loud because I wanted you to hear it. It would be great." So I wouldn't say so much you steal things. Plagiarism definitely happens in comedy. There have been comedians I've heard of before who have outright stolen almost word for word other comedians' work because we have written these jokes down and worked very hard to make them funny, to make them the best that they can be. Some comedians have been caught in the act and been called out for it. I believe, don't come at me if this is incorrect. I think it was Dane Cook might have plagiarized a few lines. He paid back the people that he had stolen from and made a public apology. And of course, there are people who will say all the time that their things were stolen when they weren't. I know that there are other comedians out there doing well who have stolen work from comedians that didn't quite get as popular as quickly. And unfortunately, that is something that happens. But in the workshop setting, I think everybody has that thing of, what do you think of this thing I've been working on? Oh, add this. I think that'll really give it that 1-2 punch it needs to get to be the best that it can be. And it's just differentiating between, oh, this is a workshop where we're helping each other out, and then that very obvious, you just stole everything I was about to say.
Have you been on the road?
Not yet. I'm still pretty new to actually performing stand up. My very first stand up gig was on St. Patrick's Day this year. And when it comes to getting on the road, it's about having minimum usually of 45 minutes of solid material. And when you're starting out, finding somebody who's already been on the road for a while, partnering with them, and then going with them to tour a place because,
Is that how it
it's
works?
very few people are actually selling out entertainment locations when they perform. A lot of times, comedy clubs will make money from how many drinks they're selling. That's why a lot of them will give out free tickets and have a 2-drink minimum. But if you can get on as a warm-up comic for somebody that's a little bit more established, that's a great way to work on your material, become a better comedian, at the same time, just build a little bit of a name for yourself. And I think with COVID, that's kind of something that's been paused for a bit, that's slowly gaining traction again. And yeah, it's something I would love to do, but right now I don't have anything scheduled or planned. I'm just networking all I can to try and find somebody where I could do that. But I mean, if you're not hanging out around North Hollywood and you want to see my comedy, you can find it, like I was saying, on my Instagram page. And there's a link there to my TikTok where it's just bits of my comedy getting posted frequently for everybody to see and enjoy.
Is there any thoughts of, well, let me ask, are you up to the point where you have your 45 minutes yet, or are you still kind of adding to it and
I'm
making it work?
would like to say I have it. I've never had the opportunity to sit, and I unfortunately, for lack of time management, haven't sat down and just tried to practice on my own doing 45 minutes. I have a lot of material that definitely needs to be tweaked a bit. But we'll see. I mean, hopefully it's one of those, I mean, it depends on the audience. If you have the right laughter, you could make 45 minutes go for an hour, and you could make 10 minutes go for 20. It's a relative soft 45 minutes that you want to have.
Yeah, I mean, making anybody laugh is tough. I mean, particularly in today's environment, with everybody so sensitive about everything else, and even the the lightest reference can set somebody off somewhere. Do you find this as any kind of a problem for you or for any of your other associates in the biz?
I haven't seen it personally. I think there are definitely people who will have a bad day who come to a comedy club and will get their feathers ruffled by something that they might have personally taken out of context. And then, of course, there are comedians who will just get up there and say the most vile, awful things. I had a friend tell me about being at a comedy club, seeing somebody do their 5 minutes, and she said the MC got up and was like, "Okay, you're done," when he was not even halfway through his set. He was just being so awful with the things he was saying that were incredibly misogynistic as well as racist. But then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, I think you can say, I mean, I was just saying I have a whole thing in my bit about being a pastor's kid. There are some people who might have a bad day and take that the wrong way and think I was saying something that I wasn't. Unfortunately, miscommunication just happens. I think it's about knowing who your audience is, which is number one, anytime you're speaking on anything, anywhere. And then, of course, just do your best to follow the creed of House Sam's or House Chris says, just try to be nice. I, in particular, most of my comedies, as I was saying, is storytelling, making fun of either myself or my immediate family. And I've asked them before, like, oh, do you mind if I make fun of this thing that happened? And they're usually fine with it. It's just finding the right moments to say certain things. I I have a joke with some of my friends that I made people laugh at a funeral once. Obviously, I'm not going to funerals all the time and telling jokes. That's not appropriate. But when my great uncle passed away, it was something happened that reminded us of a silly story, and I retold it in a stand-up comedian style because that's who I am as a person. And I got some laughs, and it was family who needed a laugh in the moment, and it worked. It's knowing your audience, but also knowing what is okay to say. It's like that classic thing of, if you don't want a man to say it to you in prison, don't say it to a woman walking down the street. Having self-discernment is incredibly important.
As you were talking, I was thinking, are there a lot? Well, what's a lot? I mean, are there quite a few Christian comedians in your sphere right now?
Well, I know a few. It's unfortunately in Hollywood, just throwing around the C word can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about knowing the time and place to say, oh, yes, I'm a Christian, and saying that confidently and not throwing it around the way some celebrities talk about being Buddhist. They're definitely not. They might say that they are, but they're not. It's something that kind of can creep up on its own every now and then. And then, of course, there is an entire side of the industry of people who are specifically Christian comedians that will perform in churches who are pretty popular because they know their audience, they know their reach. One comedian that I really enjoy who isn't in my sphere, I've never met her or anything, she's hilarious, is Angela Johnson, who has that classic joke of, I'm a Christian comedian. She says, that means I'm a comedian who's also a Christian. I don't have jokes that are just like, Peter, James, and Paul walked into a bar, sirs.
Yeah,
It's just,
what I kind of am thinking in terms of is kind of somebody who's family friendly, where the family can go and bring the kids and everybody can have a good laugh, and laugh together and so forth.
yeah, there's certainly a ton of clean comics out there. I mean, I personally make a point to stay clean in all of my comedy because I just know people will be recording it and somebody will send it to my mom. And that's enough reason for me to stay clean.
Guess what she said?
Yeah.
And
there's
the
so many
problem
clean
I have
comics.
is I
It's easy to
have
find
this
them.
mind that likes to think about things to do. And I recently joined the Pure Flix streaming thing. And frankly, I haven't streamed anything yet, but I'm thinking it would be fun to have a family friendly, say 4 or 5 comedians just do, uh, an hour show, and all of you get out there and just have some fun, and you don't need to have the 45 minutes, you can have
Oh
the
yeah, those
15
those
or 20
exist though. I
minutes.
mean, I was raised watching those as a kid. So the clean stuff is out there. You just have to find it is the thing. I think the problem with a lot of new and up and coming or attempted up and coming comics is they want to be shocking, they want to be memorable, but we've reached that point in our world where just having filthy language and talking about inappropriate things aren't shocking anymore. It's what everyone is doing. So when you make a point of just actually having good material and for the most part keeping it clean, you're the person that's remembered.
Yeah. Um, as you were talking, suddenly I was going to have a question. It was just burning in my head, and now it's gone. So
Oh, sorry.
I'm in great shape here. Uh, the oh yeah, here it is. One of the things that we've seen recently is, well, not so recently, but a lot of comics. I'm thinking of Seinfeld and the others end up being on their own TV shows. And there's something about a comedian that also includes acting. I mean, that's what you're doing with these stories is acting them and creating characters, and so
Mhm.
forth. Have you thought about doing any acting or you know
Well, I
anything
don't
like?
think you can live in Los Angeles and say that you're not an actor. It's it's something that everybody does all the time. I mean, I've definitely have friends and I that are actors, and I have done acting in the past. I just very much am not a Shakespeare actor or anything serious. I'll get on the stage when it's the stuff more than very John serious soap
uh,
opera, what have you. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot of comedians want to have their own show. Of course, that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that every comedian dreams about. It's just very few comedians actually manage to pull it off. That was something that was discussed in a panel that I went to at a comedy festival recently. They said, you find out whether or not those work if the comedian is actually a writer, not a writer in the sense of they're writing jokes, but a writer that can put together story structure. Because unless you have a good story in every single episode, nobody's going to watch this show because that's what people want when they sit down and watch a sitcom. I mean, that's the reason Seinfeld lasted for so long. And one show that I always loved when I was a kid was According to Jim with Jim Belushi. And then you look at other things like John Mulaney's show, which lasted, I think it was 3 episodes or something, maybe more, but it didn't last long. I don't know if that was because he wasn't a writer or if it was just it didn't find the right audience. But yeah, I think, well, oh, it was a line from 30 Rock where they said, anybody can be an actor. All you have to do is stay on your mark and do the same thing every take for continuity.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I've done some stage work, and believe me, that's exactly what it is.
Oh,
Just
yeah,
doing it the
absolutely.
same way every time, and letting the director kind of decide what that's going to look like, I think is what a lot of it is. Do you write comic fiction or comic writing at all?
Well, I think unless you're going to write something that is meant to be performed, it's very hard to make it comedic. I don't think I've ever read a book or a blog post and laughed out loud. It's more of just like, oh, that's an interesting circumstance that you got yourself into. I've worked on comedy pilots before, and like any comedy writer, I have ideas for screenplays. And I've read Save the Cat 50 times, and I've taken writing classes. But like so many other things in this life, it's just a project that sits uncompleted. But I am a part of a writers group, and I have I've written more than one pilot and spec script. I write a lot with my brother, and the two of us really do our best work, I think, when we're able to collaborate and work together. And it's so awesome. Like anybody that wants to get into writing, be it comedic or dramatic, just join a writers group. It's one of the best things you can do. And you have a lot of it's especially when it's a writers group of people who know what they're doing and know how to write well. It's a great opportunity to find out the problems in a loving atmosphere and fix them so that you can make it better.
Yeah, what I'm hearing as you're talking is and just kind of getting an idea of who you are, and just to let you know, you're a delightful lady.
Oh, thanks.
I'm serious. Is that right now you seem to be closing in on maybe 27, 28, something like that, or you don't have to tell me. Am I close or?
Sure, yeah, we'll call that close.
Okay, let's say that's
What was
close.
it that Superman says to Lois Lane in the interview when she asks him how old you are? He's like, I'm over 21.
No,
That's my
and the
answer.
idea is I don't want to. All I'm trying to say is you seem to have an awful lot of um, what focus. That's the word I'm trying to come up with, and I like that. I think that's great. And when I ask if you're doing this or doing that, yeah, I thought about it, or yeah, I do it, but you're really concentrating on the comic part of it right now. How much of comedy is thinking about it and thinking about how you're going to say something, or how you're going, or what exactly the words are, and so forth, and how much of it is serendipity while you're on the stage?
Oh, I mean, in my experience, more than 99% is preparation beforehand. And part of that might come from the fact that like I have done some acting. I've done stage things. My minor from my university is in theater. So I want to be prepared. I want to have the best presentation that I can. I think when it comes out organically, you have to write it down, you have to tune it and make it better. And I mentioned I started doing actually performing stand up in March of this year, but you have to understand before that I spent more than a year taking classes at Second City. I have read books on writing comedy. I have taken other writing classes. I've written multiple comedic pilots before then. It's just nothing that's gone anywhere exciting because that's how it is most of the time. You write 800 things and you're lucky if two of them get picked up. It's something that you definitely have to prepare for. There's certainly a talent for people who can improv and come up with their set on the spot when they get the mic and they step on stage. However, that comes from so much training beforehand. It's improv classes and improv work and workshops that have brought them to that point of being able to just say something on the fly that's hilarious. I don't have the ability to do that because I'm very much that person who 6 months after the argument thinks of something awesome to say when I'm in the shower. Of course, if maybe if I had the right training, I could. I don't think I'm brave enough to attempt that. But whether it's a line that you came up with in the moment or not that you're delivering, it comes from so much preparation. I think every comedian, all of their stories come from just personal experience as well. It's how many times you've told the story to friends and family and made them laugh before you actually turned it into a joke with a setup and a knockout. It's yeah, I'd say all of it is preparation beforehand, and then just remembering it in the moment is probably 1% or less.
Okay. Yeah, that would seem logical to me. It's like ad-libbing in a play. You don't know what's going to
Mhm.
happen if you open your mouth and not say
Yeah.
something that's not expected. So it's um, are is all of this preparation and all of this focus that you have, um, which I'm kind of feeling is quite a bit. Does it get in the way of any kind of personal relationships or personal life that you might have? I mean,
Well, it's very kind of you to call me focused because I don't think my mom would agree. But um, I don't think a lot of people would agree that I'm focused. I'm I'm definitely focused on comedy. I'm focused on delivering the right line at the right moment, even if it just means making one person in the room laugh. I I haven't really noticed that, but also I've kind of been the crooked weird one my whole life. So if you're not supposed to constantly be thinking about retelling a story in a funny way, I don't know what you're supposed to be doing.
yeah. Um,
Mhm.
the um, tell me about Maggie, your
Oh, my
horse.
horse Maggie. Nobody asks about Maggie. Well, I've been horseback riding since before I could walk. And I grew up with my grandparents had a small farm. They had horses. We were always riding. We were always in the woods being crazy. And I got Maggie as a gift from a second cousin when it was West Virginia. So it takes me a second to sort out and be like, how can I explain it? It was my second cousin. She was a Christmas gift. I was 11. She was 9 months old, which horses you are constantly training their whole lives, but when it comes to actually riding them, it usually doesn't start until they're about 2. So she, for the most part, was still a baby at the time. And let's be real, she's still a baby now. She's just a bigger baby who's a bit smarter. She um she lives back in West Virginia, and yeah, horseback riding is one of those things that it's very hard to explain to people who do not do it. Because anytime you ride your horse, each of you are putting each other's lives in the other's hands. And because I've ridden Maggie more than anybody else, I am the person who rides her the most. I was the first person to sit on her back. We have a very unique relationship, and we can each sense each other's very small muscle movements to know what the other wants. And constantly she has to be reminded that we do what I want, not what she wants. But it's horseback riding is just it's very therapeutic in so many ways. It's very much an awesome adventure that I'm incredibly thankful to have grown up doing, because it is a challenge. It's physically exhausting, but so incredibly rewarding because the relationship I have with my horse is so different and excels beyond anything else I could hope for. And it's not something you can replicate with any kind of person or any other kind of animal. It's you only get it from horses. A horse and rider relationship is just as close, arguably, if not more so close than a person and their dedicated dog. It's just so much different at the same time. And Maggie is, I mean, you did ask specifically about Maggie, not about horseback riding. So let me actually answer the question. Maggie is half Tennessee Walker, half saddlebred, which means she has one gear, and that's fast. And she's kind of a mutt in the sense of horses. She's not purebred. She's not fancy. She behaves about 70% of the time. And she's also very sweet. I'll never forget after I went and saw the movie Tangled for the very first time with a group of friends, everybody was talking about the horse Maximus and that. And I'm like, yeah, that's just like Maggie. And they're like, no, it's just like a dog. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. That's what she's called, and she'll give you kisses the way a dog will if you want her to. But yeah, Maggie is one of the most special things in the world to me. And I think I've more than answered the question and probably eaten a lot of time. So I'm going to wrap it up there with she's my child that I didn't give birth to.
Is she close by, or where is she?
No, she is in West Virginia. There's areas for horseback riding in California, but I grew up in West Virginia and it's much greener place than here. And it's a great space for horses. And I can't imagine taking her anywhere else. Thankfully, I get to visit home and visit my parents, visit friends, and go see her a few times a year, which I'm very thankful for.
Oh, that's nice. It's kind of like when I see my grandkids, about the same amount of time.
Yeah.
Uh,
But your grandkids get to FaceTime you. I don't get to FaceTime a horse. She's not going to understand what's
yeah,
going
that'd be
on.
cool. That wouldn't be that hard, you know. You could just keep the conversation on your side. You'd be going pretty well. Do you, does Maggie come into your routines at all, or?
Not yet. I'm sure there is so much potential material from her though. I'll never forget when she was still a baby and we had her at my grandparents' farm. Um, she was like the extra grandkid. I mean, my grandparents would just let her run around loose in the yard. And the irony is the dog that they had was tied up at the same time. But she gets into a lot of trouble. I think there's material there if I'm ever giving a stand-up routine to a room full of like cowboys.
Well, just to let you know, I'm up into Tehachapi, which is probably about 2 hours from you.
Okay.
And yeah, we're up here about 4,000 feet, and there's a lot of horse people up here.
Mm.
Just to let you know that
Oh, thank you.
yeah, if you ever decided to ride her cross country and park her someplace, it's not a bad place. It really isn't.
She an interesting idea. I think she'd throw me off and go home before we'd made it a mile outside of the away from the barn.
Yeah, I listened to you talk to her, and I think that you really, I mean, I think you really love this animal,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
it's a shame you only see her now and then. That's
Mhm.
all my thought is. Um, who's your favorite comedian?
Oh gosh. Um, I don't know because comedian is such a broad spectrum of, I mean, there are comedic writers that I love and performers
Well,
that I love.
whoever, you know, who's in the
One of
showbiz.
my favorite writers is Oscar Wilde. I got to be in production of The Importance of Being Earnest, which I think is one of the funniest plays ever written. And then at the same time, definitely a big influence for me through middle school and high school and nowadays was Tina Fey. Um, and when it comes to stand up, oh, there are just so many good ones. Um, hmm. I mean, I am a millennial, so I will say I always laugh at John Mulaney, and I love Angela Johnson. She's awesome. Yeah, I could keep going with this for like 3 hours. There's a lot of comedians that I love. It'd be hard to pick one singular favorite. Oh, I
If
have one favorite comedian,
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
that's my great aunt Betty. She's not a performer or anything. She's just a really awesome lady that's funny every time I talk to her.
Would you say the name again? I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. I
Sorry,
apologize.
it was my great aunt. She's Betty, Aunt Betty. My Aunt Betty is my favorite comedian.
If you were to map out your next year, let's say, and you actually had control over it, uh, what would you be doing over the next year?
Oh, if I had complete control over it,
Yeah, and we don't.
um,
You know we don't.
I would love to be gifted $50 million from Jeff Bezos that the IRS does not notice, and then
Good for you.
have Oprah pick up my books for her book clubs, and at the same time, Netflix to sweep in and offer me a stand-up deal. And just organizing all those things would take about a year. So I'll meet you back here for the next Halloween, and my costume will probably be the Goblin King from Labyrinth. And yeah, that's my next year. Bezos, Oprah, Netflix, Halloween costume.
Do you want to do a comedy thing on Netflix, or do you want to just do any old thing?
Oh, who doesn't want to do a comedy thing on Netflix?
Are you working towards that?
It's well, it's just, you know, you got to take comedy one day at a time. You never, a set that an audience might have loved one night, the next audience might hate on the following night. I mean, I said earlier you can stretch 5 minutes into 10. Well, I've had 5 minute sets last 4 minutes because nobody is laughing. And even though you have like the zingers and the callbacks, nobody cares. And you end up rapping before you're given the 1 minute light. It's just how it goes. The nice thing though about comedy, especially at this level of just doing gigs at comedy clubs and things, is the audience will be different every time, and that can make or break the night. If it's a great night, that's awesome, and they laugh, and you know that you're good. If they're bad, they don't laugh at anything, you just say, well, you know what? It's over now, and I don't have to do it again. You just keep working on the set until the next time you step up in front of an audience.
Do they warm these audiences up at all at these comedy clubs, or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it depends on the club as to what you're going to get, but typically you have an MC who has been doing comedy a long time who will warm everybody up with a minute or two before they bring on their first comedian. And, you know, in almost every circumstance, the room is just padded with each comedian will bring friends and fans that they know will laugh. So it's a great time to just grow your audience. And like I said, you're going to try different stuff. Some nights you might fall flat on your face, but you get to try it again later. But yeah, they're usually warmed up. And that also goes to say the people before you, sometimes they'll tell you how your set's going to go. I was doing I was doing a bit down in San Clemente once, and it was kind of a dive bar sort of setting. And everybody else that went that night before me had incredibly risque jokes the entire time. And then I got up there and I decided not to talk about being a pastor's kid because I didn't feel like it would fit with that crowd. But yeah, I told jokes that usually get laughs, got nothing. And I was like, yeah, I mean, if I was making a joke about something inappropriate, even if it wasn't clever, I'm sure they'd laugh at it, but that's not my style. But I still did my bits. My awesome roommate came and she laughed anyways. Yeah. So it's sometimes the people you're going after will set up for your failure or your success. I mean, there have definitely been times before where I've gone on after someone who wasn't having the best night or was trying new material that they hadn't worked on very much yet, and they were finding out what worked and what didn't. And sometimes that can mean nobody's ready to laugh for you. And sometimes it can mean everybody's bored and they're looking for anything to laugh at. It just depends.
Do you have anybody filming your stuff so you can kind of take a look at yourself afterwards and see
Yeah,
how it
I
went?
I get recorded, like I have friends recording almost every time I go up.
Do you?
And like I mentioned, you know, that's what goes on Instagram and TikTok, so that if anybody hears my name and wants to see my things, they have a place to find it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, I think we're probably coming to the end of this. You know, and do you have do you have anything to say to anybody out here that you just kind of like to get out there?
I mean, you know, comedy isn't for everybody. It's definitely, I think people can find it when they weren't expecting it to be their thing. It's certainly for the folks that know how to bounce back. I haven't I mean, not to say I'm sure they exist, but I mean, I don't think I know a comedian that wasn't at some point in their life a victim of bullying who doesn't know how to just bounce back from it. And you know, it's just whatever you're trying to do, you just have to keep working at it. You have to be willing to study. You have to be willing to improve. I mean, we haven't discussed a ton of spiritual things, but one of my favorite series of all time is the Chronicles of Narnia, and something that I get reminded of frequently when it comes to working on my craft or something spiritual is in Voyage of the Dawn Treader. There's this whole story of Edmund turning into the dragon, or excuse me, not Edmund, Eustace. Ugh, I'm gonna get so much hate from my brother for listing the wrong character. So Eustace has been turned into a dragon, and he has to scratch away the scales so that he can get this magic bracelet off, and he can turn back into a human. And it's very much hurts, but he can't cut deep enough to get the dragon scales off, and he has to allow Aslan, the god character, to cut deep enough into his skin to remove this layer of sin basically that he has so that he can wash in this pool and be healed. And I think, of course, yes, that goes with the sins that we struggle with and the things in our life that we need to let go of in order to have a better walk with the Lord. It also goes for things like writing or acting or comedy or being a doctor. You know, you have to be willing to cut away the things that are wrong and bad for you in order to improve and be a better version of yourself, because you know what you have might be okay in some circumstances, but it's not going to work in all of them. And I think we should always be working to improve our craft, whatever it may be. And it can certainly be painful to hear edits or hear reviews sometimes, but sometimes we have to hear them in order to get better. So if you want to do any sort of industry thing, my advice is to learn all you can and be willing to make changes where they need to be made.
Well, where do you think God's taken you?
Uh, do you mean spiritually or physically? Because I've never been on a missions trip at all. I think I definitely live in the mission field. I believe that no matter what we're doing, if we have a relationship with God, we are called to be missionaries. That doesn't mean packing up and going to Africa, but I think that God has taken me very far. I've had plenty of moments in my life of being reminded, you know, this is where I'm going to raise my Ebenezer. God has brought me this far. And um, I think that God has definitely always put me where I'm supposed to be. I once heard our pastor explain Southern California is right outside the gates of hell. And you know what? That's where we need to be, grabbing people by the hair and pulling them out of hell. For now, I know that in this season of life, it's where I'm supposed to be. There could someday come a time when God calls me somewhere else. I think, I mean, another snippet of advice for anybody considering the move to LA, you should do it if it's the right thing for you and the right timing. But something you should never do is put a limit on yourself. Some really great advice I got before I moved out here was never go into LA or Los Angeles or New York even with that mindset of, okay, I'm going to be here for X amount of years, and if this doesn't work, I'm done. You have to come here to come here. You know, God calls us to do something because there is a purpose behind it, and He will put you exactly where you need to be. And it's just about being open to what He has next in those moments. And of course, listening to everything He tells you to.
It's He brings us every place for two reasons. One, it's for ourselves, because we're going to face some things that are going to work some things out in us that we need worked out, and then for other people, so that we can be some sort of light in the darkness. And you're in a very dark place there. I mean, you really are.
Oh, I agree.
You're this notion that you said, you know, can't go around running around telling everybody you're a Christian, you know, because there's genuine persecution there. And God didn't put you there to just, you know, sacrifice everything. He has something for you to
Exactly.
do. And I guess what I just like to say, you know, you're young, you're showing amazing amount of courage. You
Thank
really
you.
are. I'm serious. To do what you're doing is very courageous, and I want to laud you for it. I hope I get a chance one day to see you on stage, or see a video of you, or whatever. I don't do Instagram and I don't do TikTok, uh, but you know, maybe I'll get a chance. You
Well,
know, maybe.
I can send you a link to my YouTube page here. I'm also on there. I will email it right over as soon as we're done. How about that?
Well, I'd love to. I'd love to see you on stage. I really would.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Here's just my thought. I just want to wish you all the best in the world, and
Thank you.
never lose the idea that God is sitting right there on your shoulder, and he's got your back, and um, he's going to see you through everything, you know. And if someday in the future you decide to change direction or do something different, it's just because God has got another door open for you that he wants you to walk through. And just God bless you. Okay, really, God bless you. And I
Thank you.
hope I get a chance to meet your brother one day. He sounds like a nice guy. He really does. Anyway, you have a
Yeah, well, let me know if you're looking for other people to interview. Yeah.
say that again. Say that again.
Oh, I mean, if you would need other people to interview, I have two brothers, and both of them, I'm incredibly thankful, are strong Christians walking with the Lord, and they are two creative people. So if you're looking for someone to interview, I can pass them along.
Oh, I would love
Yeah.
to. I would love to. Give me an email address or something. I just love to even just get to know them, even if they decide they don't want to be on the show. I'd love to just chat with them.
Thanks. Yeah.
I love young people. I'm almost 80 years old. I mean, I don't have another 4 or 5 years left. But the
Well, you don't look a day over 70.
no, you guys have just so much energy and uh, the so much bravery out there, and I just never fail to be impressed. Anyway, God bless you.
Well,
God bless your family, and
thank you.
all the best to you. Seriously, Danae. God
Thank you
bless.
so much. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying all that. It's all because of Jesus. Let's be real.
Okay, and God bless and take care. Bye bye. Until next time, be a creative Christian.